Let's talk about what it means to be an effective leader. What do we mean when we say leader effectiveness? First, I'd remind you of our process model of leadership, in which the leader behaves in certain ways, the followers react to those behaviors, and leadership outcomes occur. And the effectiveness of those outcomes depends on the followers' behaviors, and the followers react to the leader's behaviors. And the situation, of course, has an important role to play throughout. That's our backdrop here. And so in this lecture, we're going to be talking about this box here. What is leader effectiveness? When we talk about leader effectiveness, we're really talking about two things. Did you get the job done? And did you help out the team? When we're talking about getting the job done, we're talking about mission accomplishment. Did you accomplish the mission? Did you do what was expected of you or better? Now, when we talk about this viability of the team, we're talking about taking care of your sailors and Marines. Is the team better than when you started? Are people committed to you and the mission at the end of this leadership episode? Both of these are important outcomes. Getting the job done, mission accomplishment, and taking care of your sailors. For shortness sake, we might call these results and retention. The idea that results are, did you accomplish the mission? And retention is, are your people committed to the organization and are they going to stay on? Because look, any one of us can achieve results. We can accomplish the mission by burning out our people. At the same time, we can completely take care of our people without focusing on the mission. Either one of those is going to be wrong. In the Navy, we have a saying that we say, mission first, people always. Well, I can tell you it wasn't always that way. I can remember a time when it was people first. And in fact, I can remember when I was in postgraduate school many years ago, and Admiral Vern Clark was the CNO. And he came and he gave us a lecture, and he talked about what this meant to put the mission first and to actually put it ahead of our people. And look, that's a hard ask. We get taught, and I know you have learned by now, that taking care of your sailors and Marines is a core part of our job. And I am not taking away from it. It absolutely is. And accomplishing the mission is what we are here for. This is part of the why that we take care of our people, is to help us to accomplish the mission. Well, Admiral Clark told us a story about, at that time, the USS John F. Kennedy, which was an aircraft carrier, conventional aircraft carrier stationed in Florida. And at the time, they had just failed an in-serv inspection. An in-serv is a massive engineering inspection. If you stick around the Navy long enough, you'll go through it and you'll find that it's very painful inspection, and it's really about making sure that you are completely material ready. Well, John F. Kennedy was getting ready to get underway for a deployment. And as they're getting ready to get underway, they had this inspection and they failed it. And when you fail an in-serv inspection, that means you essentially get welded to the pier. You cannot get underway. So what do you think happened after this? Well, the sailors on board the John F. Kennedy ended up working nights and weekends until they could get that ship fixed, ready to get underway. And that took a gargantuan effort by not just the sailors on board, but everyone in Mayport. And oh, by the way, they were doing this at a time when they were getting ready to go on a 6-month deployment. Is this taking care of our sailors? And Admiral Clark would say, no, it's absolutely not. That this is about burning out our sailors, and it's not taking care of them. But in this short-term moment, it was about accomplishing the mission. Now, we cannot forget about taking care of our sailors. If we continue to burn our people out in order to accomplish a mission, we're not going to have a team left to accomplish that mission. These two things go hand in hand. But you need to think about the greater system at large. Think about the sailors on board the aircraft carrier that was being relieved by the John F. Kennedy in Admiral Clark's story. They couldn't come back from deployment. So was it taking care of them to leave them out there? Was it taking care of those sailors to give the sailors on the John F. Kennedy an extra weekend and extra time off before they got underway? This is all a balancing process that you're going to have to go through. And look, I'm not telling you in every time there is a perfect balance between these two things. In fact, I just illustrated a story in which there was not. It is about putting the mission first, but always thinking about your people. because your people are how you accomplish the mission. If you could do it by yourself, you would, but you can't. Leadership is hard and it requires people to help you accomplish this mission. I know I keep harping on this idea, but I really wanted to get this across. I want you to understand that when you think about effectiveness outcomes, you need to think about what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What do results look like? What do retention look like? What does it mean to accomplish my mission? And what does it mean for my team to be viable and better than when I found it? Let's talk about how that gets assessed. Your commander is going to assess your effectiveness. They're going to assess it on a number of different ideas. The first one is simple. Did you accomplish the mission? But that's not the only thing, because oftentimes your commander might not be able to tell whether or not you have accomplished a mission. If you're not on deployment or you're not otherwise engaged in a certain mission, that opportunity for assessing those results might not be there. We call those in the military measures of effectiveness. Right? Were you effective? Did you achieve your results? Did you accomplish the mission? Did you take care of your people? Measures of effectiveness. But because we can't always see the further outcomes of effectiveness, we have to look at short-term indicators and at your individual behaviors in order to get there. So how is your commander going to assess your effectiveness as a leader? First, they're going to look at whether or not you accomplish a mission. They're also going to observe your command. They're going to see what's happening. Are standards being held up? Are you doing the little things correctly? Does the command do the things that are asked of it along the way? This isn't necessarily about accomplishing the final mission, but it does give your commander the idea that you are leading a command that will accomplish a mission. Again, these are short-term indicators that don't get to that final outcome, but give the commander the idea that you are on the correct path towards that final outcome. The commander may also directly observe you leading and observe your actual behaviors. When the commander does that, what she's doing is she's observing your behaviors and making inferences about whether or not you are going to be effective. This is how you're going to be assessed. These shorter term measures, your behaviors and the short term indicators, we call measures of performance. These measures of performance then lead to measures of effectiveness. Here's the key takeaway for you. You need to know what your mission is, and you need to know what your commander's expectations are. What are her expectations for how you're going to behave? What are her expectations for your short-term missions that you're going to accomplish, the tasking that you're going to do? And what are her expectations for your overall mission? Know your mission and know your commander's expectations. What does this mean for you now? Well, first of all, I want to talk about other people who are going to assess your leadership. I just talked about the commander. The commander assesses your leadership. But you know what? The followers get a say too. And your followers are going to assess your leadership. They're going to consider their own personal outcomes. Am I being taken care of? They're going to consider the outcomes of the unit. Am I on a winning team? And they're going to look at what outcomes they expect to see. Again, this gets to the question of, am I on a winning team? You have certainly had experience as a follower. Think about a leader that you have, good leaders and bad leaders. Think about how and why you assess them to be good leaders and bad leaders. Who was a good leader? What did that person do? Why did you make those inferences about their abilities as a leader? Think about a bad leader. What did that person do? Think about what outcomes for you and for the unit led you to that assessment that they were a bad leader. We also use sometimes, particularly if we're looking at trying to coach a leader or develop a leader to help understand their leadership a little bit more, we'll use what's called multi-source feedback. This means going to several people, 360 degrees around the leader, to identify how they're doing. We might ask the commander. We might ask the followers. We might ask the leader's peers. We'll even ask the leader themselves, how do you think you're doing? This, by the way, is something you can engage in. You can ask your commander, how do you think I'm doing? You can ask your followers and solicit feedback from them. You can ask your peers, and you can do a self-assessment of how you think you're doing. These are all different ways that we assess leaders on a regular basis. And we think about, so when we think about those effectiveness outcomes, it's those that measures of effectiveness largely depends on who is doing the measuring. Is it your commander? Is it your followers? Is it you? Is it your peers? These are all things that you need to consider when you think about measuring that effectiveness. Now, what comes with that is biases in the way we do this assessment. So first of all, we need to understand that there's going to be some bias in terms of leader emergence versus leader effectiveness. Okay, what do I mean by that? Leader emergence, the leader who emerges. This is the person who speaks up a lot, who takes charge, takes a leadership role. Remember, I talked about that, that process of granting and requesting and claiming leadership roles. The person who claims a leadership role and is granted emerges as a leader. Sometimes we mistake leader emergence for leader effectiveness. In fact, when we do research about this, when we look at a team and we look at early in a team's existence, what we often see is that the most extroverted, the biggest talkers, the people who are most willing to take charge emerge as leaders. And everybody says, oh, that person's a leader and they're doing a really good job. And then what we see over time is that the effective leaders emerge later. And maybe that person who initially emerged isn't that effective in what they're doing, and they start to fall by the wayside. At the same time, maybe it's that quieter person. Maybe it's the person who's even just a little bit anxious about their role and what they're supposed to do. And they're certainly a lot full of humility, but also maybe a little bit of anxiety. And so they don't speak up right away. Again, they don't emerge. But later on, it turns out that they're a very effective leader. When we're making our assessments about who is a good leader and what they've been able to do, sometimes we conflate emergence with effectiveness. But you need to understand that they're two different things. Another thing that can bias our assessments is this idea of liking. This is what we call an affective response, or a feelings-based response to a leader. Whether we're a follower or we're rating a leader who is under us, one of the things that we need to be careful about is, are we actually assessing that leader? Or do we just either like them or not like them? Oftentimes we might like them because they're like us, or maybe we don't like them because they're not like us. That can be a real problem. And so we have to do our best to diverge between, do I like this person and are they an effective leader, and try to be unbiased in that. Something that goes along with this is this idea of what we call implicit leadership theories. Hold on with me for a second here. Here's the idea. We all have in our brains an idea of an effective leader. In fact, if I was going to say, okay, picture a leader right now. In fact, let's do that. Let's picture a leader. Who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of an effective leader in this situation. Especially, let me think about, I'm in this crisis situation and I need someone to help me get out of it. That we really need someone who's going to take charge and help us get out of it. I develop in my mind a picture of who that is. That's what I call an implicit leadership theory. If you're like most people, you most likely are picturing a male. In fact, you're very likely picturing a white male. That's just a fact of life because of the way our society is. This is who we choose and who we think about in terms of implicit leadership. It doesn't mean that men are better leaders. In fact, we could have a whole discussion about how they're actually not predisposed to be better leaders. It doesn't mean that white people are better leaders than blacks. Certainly, there's no difference that we can discern there. The question is, what do we picture in our head? And that's it's frankly biased, and it comes from societal pressures. My example I use for this is my own daughters when they were very young. I was a department head on a ship out of San Diego. And I came home from work one day and I was talking something about work. I said, oh, the captain, this and that, and she did this and she did that. And I remember my oldest daughter was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. She says to me, Dad, girls can't be captain. Oh my gosh. This blew my mind. Like, this certainly isn't something my wife and I taught our children, that girls couldn't be captain. We want them to know that women can grow up to do anything that they want to do. How do they get this idea? I don't know. It's just the way our society is built. It's from watching exemplars on TV and in movies and in talking to people and hearing the language that people use. They just got this idea in their heads. This is the implicit leadership theory. It grows into our brains. And here's what happens, and this is why I'm bringing it up here, is this idea of an implicit leadership theory is important to us. It's important to us in a couple of ways. One, it affects our emergence as a leader. When you make a leadership claim and someone is making a decision about whether to grant you that claim, what they're actually doing is a matching exercise where they're matching what you have done, who you are and what you look like, and the things that you're doing. They are matching that against their implicit leadership theory. To the extent that there's an overlap there, you are likely to emerge as a leader. They are likely to grant you that leadership role. And look, in the Navy and Marine Corps, we give you a little bit of extra stuff to help you get there. We put the UCMJ behind you. We're going to give you gold bars that you're going to put on your collar and rank insignia so that people will look at you and say, yes, that person is a leader. But part of this is about your behaviors and how people think about you to begin with. The other reason, the reason I'm bringing it up here when we talk about these biases of assessments, is when we are assessing someone on their leadership, whether we're doing that as a follower or as the commander of someone who is a leader, a lot of times we're also making the mistake of comparing them to our implicit leadership theory instead of looking at whether or not they were effective. Did they accomplish the mission, and is their team better off than what they found it? Did they achieve results in retention? That's what matters for assessing a leader. But this other stuff, emergence versus effectiveness, liking, implicit leadership theories, these are going to get in the way of you making an unbiased decision about how you assess a leader. So what can you do about this? The first thing is that as a leader, you need to discuss expectations with your immediate superior. This is key to what you're going to do. If you don't know what your leader wants, what your commander wants, how are you supposed to meet those expectations? You need to know what mission accomplishment means. Now, I'm not suggesting here that we're overriding the message to Garcia, and we're not saying you need to take the initiative, and you don't need to ask for guidance on every single thing that you do. But you do need to understand what the expectations are. And this is true whether you are an 06, whether you're an 01, or whether you're a midshipman. If you're rolling into a fire team, or rolling in to be a squad leader, or rolling in to be a training sergeant or a first sergeant, you need to talk to your immediate supervisor and ask them, what do you expect of me? What reports would you like from me? What do you want to hear from me? How do you want to hear that? Do you want me to talk to you once a week? Do you want me to talk to you on a regular basis? How is that going to work? How are you going to judge if I'm on the right track with my mission? Right? If my job as a fire team leader is to train the plebes in my fire team, how are you going to assess whether or not I'm doing a good job of that? How will you determine at the end of the semester or at the end of this period whether or not I've been successful? And again, this affects you whether you're a midshipman or when you become an officer. These are the same questions you need to ask. What are the expectations of me? Don't just make assumptions about what those are based on what you think they are. Talk to the person who's going to be rating you. And then the same is true down the chain of command. If you want to know what's expected of you, your followers want to know what's expected of them. Have a discussion with them. What do you expect? What reports do you want to hear from them? What are you going to be observing about your followers in order to judge and assess their effectiveness? And remember, we're looking at results and retention. We're looking at that balance between mission accomplishment and taking care of our sailors and Marines. And these are the sorts of things that you need to define. What does that mean? How am I going to assess it? And how am I going to be assessed? And how well do I do that?